Hello, everyone. So it is now 2 o'clock, so we're going to get started. First of all, thank you very much for joining our webinar today. Today's topic is friction, the #1 killer of workplace productivity. My name is David Politis. I'm the founder and CEO here at BetterCloud. And before we get started with the presentation here, what I want to just go through is some logistics about how to interact with us during this presentation. So we have a community that's built on Slack called Better IT. What we'd like you to do is go ahead and join that community, betterit.cloud. And once you get signed up, you can go to the Better IT, the webinars channel in Better IT. And you can ask Q&A throughout the webinar right there in the community. You'll have a bunch of Better Clouders in there, fellow attendees here, as well as other community members who will be in that channel. So that's how we're going to be interacting throughout this webinar and even afterwards. And so again, thank you for joining, and all questions will go there. You'll see in the chat in the GoToMeeting, I put in the link for betterit.cloud. So again, if you have any questions, please head over there to ask them. So thank you very much for joining. And this is a topic here about friction that is very important to me, very near to my heart, and really my entire career. My whole career has been spent trying to reduce friction in organizations, organizations of all size, shapes, location, industry. This is what I've done for my whole career, starting with a cloud PBX company called Vocalocity, where we were going around and replacing traditional phone systems, on-premise PBXs, with a cloud PBX, one of the first actually, and just improving work. If you go back to 2005, that's when there was really a phone on everyone's desk, and we were changing the paradigm and in terms of how phones were thought of. And the phone all of a sudden became very virtual, and you could take your phone home and plug it into your Ethernet connection at home and have the same phone number that you had in the office without having to forward your calls and take your calls from your cell phone, and so on and so forth. So really trying to reduce friction around unified communications and telephony. And then Cloud Sherpas, where we were helping organizations migrate from legacy email systems to the cloud, and move all of their users and their workflows and everything into the cloud. And so again, reducing friction there. And now with BetterCloud, we started BetterCloud about 5.5 years ago, and the mission here at BetterCloud is to empower people to run the world's best workplaces through technology, and how you can leverage the investments you've made in technology to run the world's best workplaces with minimal friction. So this is very dear to my heart. And about a month ago, after a lot of conversations with customers and just different people in the industry, I felt like the stories I was hearing were just the fact that I was still hearing the kinds of stories that I was hearing about friction, about some of the VPN setups, the people who are still using old expense reporting systems, and having to tape every receipt to a piece of paper and then copy that and then fill out a spreadsheet and then get it physically signed by their manager. And I've heard too many of these stories in 2017. It doesn't make sense. So I wrote up this LinkedIn post, this article, and I published this about a month ago. And the reaction, the focus of this was really around this one image right here, which was at the top, the traditional workplace. And I focused most of my article around technology, and really how technology and SaaS specifically can reduce friction. And so this image shows you is that if you can just take this time that is spent, just extra time that is spent, again, if I use that expense reports example, or logging into the VPN, or some computer that, you boot up your laptop and it takes 15 minutes to update all do all the updates. And then once you open it, it takes another 2 minutes to get onto Wi-Fi and another 5 minutes to do this. Just removing that friction and reducing that to a point where it's as little as it can be for your workers on a day-to-day basis, and maximize the time actually spent working. And my call out at the end, my call to action was mostly to executives, saying we as executives have to start demanding this change, and not view every change and every purchase and everything just as a cost, but actually as this opportunity to increase productivity of the entire worker population that we're responsible for, and to drive collaboration. And so this was an article I wrote about a month ago, and the reactions that I got were, I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised, but they were very powerful. And I was getting it from all sorts of people. I was getting it from other C-level executives running companies. I was hearing it from some of our customers who run IT at organizations all over the world. And it's just, and I was getting it from friends of mine that saw this, that work at banks in New York, or work at insurance companies and are still using Lotus Notes, and they're still using. And so I just started getting these amazing reactions. The expense receipt Tetris. I mean, this is, for me, I still can't believe that there are still companies that are doing that. Sounds prehistoric, but it was literally a year and a half ago in corporate America. A great tweet. I mean, people just, every reaction I was getting was overly positive. And then there was this one, which got me to think. This was someone who reacted. It was actually the last comment on the LinkedIn post, and I thought that this was really interesting. The point being here, the quote, of course, you can read, is, "I don't know that SaaS is the promised land," because of course my whole post was really about SaaS specifically. "We've seen too many poorly thought out implementations create huge friction in organizations. It's the smart deployment of the right tools with strong leadership, regardless of the specific technology implementation, that reduces friction." And for me, this got me thinking in a whole different direction of, I've been so focused, and of course, biased, because this is what we do at BetterCloud, so focused on SaaS alone in my post and in all the talks that I've given about friction, that I really wasn't thinking more broadly. And so what we're going to go through now in the rest of this presentation is, I'm not going to tell you exactly how to, every single thing that you need to reduce friction in your organization, because every single person's organization is different. Your org structures are different. You're in different levels of your orgs. The budgets are different. The locations are different. So there's no simple recipe that just I can write for you here and take you through slides that says, this is exactly how you do it. But the point of this is really to outline the foundation for reducing friction. How do we identify it? Where does it tend to creep up? How do we prioritize what we work on? And so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions during this webinar, and we're going to make this presentation available afterwards, but I'm going to ask a lot of questions of you that I hope you can take back into your organizations and leverage to make change. And honestly, we did this ourselves. We did this here at BetterCloud, and Tim, who runs IT here, Tim Burke, and myself sat down and asked ourselves a lot of the questions that I'm going to ask you here today. And we made some pretty major improvements and reduced friction in a number of places just by going through the process that I'm going to take you through today. And I'll even share some of what we did here at BetterCloud. And so my hope is that you walk away today with ideas how you can really make a difference in your organization, save the organization time and money, but increase productivity and reduce friction. And it's a framework that you can hopefully go back into your org, go to leadership, go to your management, and point to this framework and ask them the same questions. And that should hopefully drive change. So that's the plan for today. I wanted to make sure to lay that out to make sure everyone's expectations are correct. So number one, where are the sources of friction? So technology. This is what I was talking about. This is where I've spent most of my time and my energy is around technology. But in technology, it could be old technology. It could also be, to that quote that I showed you before, it could be to port the wrong fit of technology, right? Maybe your organization is just using too many different technologies and you need to bring them together and limit the number of vendors you work with. Or maybe you've decided to work only with one vendor, but therefore some of the solutions you're using are not actually best in class and you need to open that up and open up to a more heterogeneous environment. Maybe it is old technology. Maybe it's devices that are 5 years old and they're really slow. Maybe it is the connectivity that you have coming into your office, and you don't have a backup connection, and so therefore if the primary goes down, you have no backup, you have no redundancy. So there's a variety of ways of how this manifests itself around technology. And then there's knowledge. As we've been preparing for this webinar and this presentation today, I've been reading a lot of articles about and looking for stats and about the knowledge that the average worker has. And it's amazing how little most people know about how to use the technologies that they have in front of them all day to do their job. And so knowledge, it's not even about spending a lot of money. It's not about spending even too much time. It's more about empowering people with the knowledge of how to do things. And so that could be a small thing like shortcuts. Shortcuts for Gmail could, save people hours a week. And most people just don't even know that shortcuts exist, let alone what they are, then how to use them. Knowledge could be very simple things that people end up having to go and Google for 2 hours trying to find out how to do something that's pretty straightforward, and they just have never been trained on how to do that. So this is hard. Again, these are all areas of friction that are challenging. The next is people. People are complicated. People don't like change. They resist change in general. And so whether the people that we're talking about here it could be leadership, it could be the end users in an organization that are having to adopt a new technology that you're rolling out. People could be other people on the IT team that have certifications that they don't want to move away from. People could be yourselves and just the amount of time and energy and focus that you have to get something done. So for me, when I look at this and I talk to some customers and I did research, what it comes down to is friction really comes from three main places. Of course, there are others that it could come from, but really it comes down to technology, knowledge, and people. And so I want to just stop here before we keep going and ask a very quick poll question to just get a sense of the audience we have. So I'm going to ask the question here of which of the following is really creating the most friction in your organization. And so you should see this poll now in front of you. So there's 5 answers that you can select here. The first is no friction at all. It's possible that no one has friction. I doubt that. Poorly implemented technology, knowledge gaps and skill levels, people's resistance to change, and everything. So I'm going to give everyone a little bit of time here to vote. So if you have a couple minutes, a couple seconds, I'm sorry, we'll just keep this open for about 15 more seconds. We're about 60% voted. Great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. So the overwhelming majority here, knowledge gaps was number 1. People's resistance to change and outdated, poorly implemented technology. That was kind of the order here. Actually, everything was up there before outdated technology. So we're going to share these results when we do our follow-up email, which will include the deck and everything in here. So we'll send the results out with that. So how do you think about solving friction? And again, this is the beginnings of some of those questions that I'm going to ask you and some of the questions we asked ourselves. So number 1 is really visualizing the outcome. That's the first step in this whole process. What is your organization's workplace utopia? That is the first question to ask yourself. And just don't freak out. That's obvious. I can ask that question and you could say, I know it in my mind, but it's going to take unlimited budget to get there. Let's come to that in a second. But that's the first question is if your organization was working 100% friction free, what would that look like? What would a person's day look like? Imagine you have unlimited time and budget. What do your business teams need? What do they want? This may seem very basic, but ask them if you haven't done that already. If you go around and say to individual people or individual departments or individual managers and you say, just tell me, what would be the most valuable thing for, what's the biggest pain point? What could I change? What technology could I bring to bear? If you do that, I think that you will find that you'll find out a lot of interesting information that you may not otherwise see. We saw this internally. Again, when I use our own example, we saw this internally when we were looking at how to reduce friction, and Tim started speaking with different teams in the organization, and engineers were saying, look, a new engineer joins and it takes them X amount of time to get ramped up because they have to do this build and they have to do this on their device and they have to do this. And if we could just reduce that, we may be able to get them up and running half a day, maybe a full day earlier. That's a big difference when you start talking about hundreds of engineers. That's a pretty big difference. And so what does your business team mean? What could make everyone 2 times more productive? Again, it's just a different way of asking the same question. So what could make every single person in your organization, one thing that can make everyone much more productive? Is it technology? Is it having some knowledge base that is available to everyone? Is it buy-in from a higher level inside of the organization to do something? What is that? What technology or process feels totally unnecessary? I guarantee 100% there is something happening that is unnecessary in your organization. Some process, some tool, something, some extra step that is happening that is completely unnecessary. What are those? There's probably many, not one. And really, it's just starting with what are they? Forget how we're going to solve that for a minute, but what are they? And then when you look at the most productive teams in your organization, how do they work? What do they use? Again, you'd be surprised. You start digging into this and you start asking around your organization, who's the most productive team? Who's the team that does the best work? Who's the team that always delivers on time? Who's the team that has all the all-stars? When you dig in, that team is probably doing something, or they're probably using a product, or they probably have figured out some process that is making them more productive. It's not just magic. It's not just the people. There's usually something else happening there. And if you can replicate that magic in other places, that's how you can reduce friction. What are processes and systems that everyone in the company interacts with? Again, you think about where to make the biggest bang for your buck. It's the products that every single person interacts with. You make improvements there and you touch everybody. What does a day in the life of an average employee look like in this work utopia? What are they doing every day? How are they interacting with the technology that they have? How are they getting knowledge when they need it on demand? That is, again, these are the questions that like I said earlier, most people on this webinar today, you probably know to ask yourself these questions. You may not have the time to do it. You may not feel empowered to do it. But I would challenge you to do this and to just start by writing all of this down. Write it down, put it in a spreadsheet somewhere, each one in its own row. Give it a name, give it some description, figure out which source it came from, and just come up with every idea. It doesn't matter how crazy the ideas are, because this is not going to be a short-term thing. This is going to take you a long time. And so let's start by just writing it all down. And then you have to look at this and say, what is it going to take to get there? When you go line by line, what is it going to take to execute on each of these ideas? Take one idea. What is it going to take for me to make sure that everyone has a laptop replaced every single year? What would that take? It looks like it would take a lot of money. Would it take a lot of time? Maybe, maybe not. What would it take to replace that expense reporting software that's being used that's 20 years old? What would it take to improve some process by connecting multiple SaaS applications that are not currently connected so that people don't have to manually move data between them? What would it take? Time, money, buy-in? I mean, looking at each of these things and deciding, what is it going to take to execute these ideas? What are you going to have to buy? Like actual software or hardware? What will you have to purchase to make it happen? You would be surprised. I bet you'd be surprised when you look at this. Again, I will speak from experience. We were surprised about how little we actually had to buy to make a difference. Some of it was just sitting there. In some cases, it was actually removing stuff that we were paying for that made it better. So ask yourself that. Again, document this. Put this in that spreadsheet in each of the rows. What people or skills would you need within IT? Again, specifically within IT, what skills are you going to need? Maybe you don't have change management skills. Maybe you don't have certain certifications around certain software. So the question is, what are you really going to need in order to actually execute this inside of IT? How much bandwidth would you and your team need? So again, about time. You're going to present this to someone. You may be the CIO. You're still going to present it probably to the CEO. You're going to be presenting this to somebody. And so the question is, how much bandwidth are you asking for? In some cases, you may be asking for 3 weeks of work to make a difference. Well, that may be harder to get approved than 2 days. But you need to write this down again and be real with yourself, project by project, and understand the scope. And then how long is it going to take? So how long will it take before you start seeing the benefits of this work or of this money that is going into this? And who do you have to get buy-in from? Again, this question of who are you going to have to go to? In some cases, there are things you can do, and I'm sure you can all think of these things that you can do without talking to anybody, and you can make a change in IT. Maybe it's a change in how tickets are getting opened for you, potentially. Maybe it's from your end users. Maybe it's a change in how a device is configured when it's given to people. Maybe it's a change, but it may be something that already exists today that you don't have to get buy-in from anyone. You just have to improve a process that you're responsible for. And then there are other things that may require buy-in all the way up to the top, to the board level. Those are things that could make huge differences. But again, start putting these into some kind of a scale. How many people are affected? Again, this is what we talked about before. Is this something that's going to touch everybody, or is this touching a subset of users in an organization? Is this touching just IT, or is this touching the entire sales department? So start looking through this spreadsheet and start grading your ideas. How easy are they? You may even want to grade them by how easy are they in each of the main categories of budget and buy-in, and start looking for which are the ones that are going to be the quickest wins. Which are the ones that you don't need too much buy-in, you need no budget, you don't need too much extra bandwidth, you don't need skills that that are new, and start to prioritize and start thinking about the ones that you can get done quickly. Now you start thinking about the impact that these are going to have. So it's good to understand how much work it's going to take, but now start quantifying the impact, because that's how you really get budget. That's how you really get buy-in. So how much value is there in removing friction? And there are two ways to quantify this value. And this is, no matter how you look at it, there's hard ROI and soft ROI. When you look at hard ROI, what that is that's really looking at that friction that I showed before, that section of friction, and looking specifically as it relates to the amount of time that friction is taking up. And looking at that time and saying, if I can save hard minutes, hours, days from my users, then how much hard ROI am I getting back? And so this is an example. If you look at this and say, look, I can save everyone 2 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day. That could be just removing when someone gets let go from your company or they leave, just removing all their calendar invites that are clogging up conference rooms. Just that small thing probably saves more than 2 minutes a day, because now when people are going to use a conference room and it's booked, but it's not actually booked, it's a ghost booking because that person no longer is there. Just that probably saves 2 minutes a day. Just making sure that someone's offboarded correctly, I could argue saves 10 minutes a day when you start making sure that people aren't getting out of bounce backs, or they're not emailing someone whose account has not been suspended, so mail is going into the abyss. All of those things save people time, save your users time. 2 minutes a day equates to about $140,000 a year in a 600-person company. And this is the lowest end of the spectrum. This is assuming the lowest salaries for every employee in that 600-person company. This is assuming only 2 minutes a day. So you think about, there's hard ROI there. And then there's soft ROI. And soft ROI, it's the impact of that time that has now been given back to your users. What can happen in that time? How much happier are your users? They could just say, look, this is much nicer to work at this place. I don't have to deal with all this friction every day in all of my work. I now know how to do things. I know where to go get information. I have the technology I want to work with. So that soft ROI is probably, in many cases, I'll say from a CEO's perspective, more valuable than the hard ROI. That time you give back, if people are more satisfied and they're more dedicated when they come in every day, and if people have more time to think about more strategic work, and if people are getting work done in more hours of the day and just moving forward projects faster, that's more, I would argue, soft ROI. So that's one unnecessary process. Find the one process in your org that is completely unnecessary across the entire org, or improve 5 processes that are in the org that you have control over. That is going to improve employee retention. That's going to improve the strategic work, the collaboration that's happening. That's going to improve so much in the organization that it is hard for any intelligent executive to argue with hard or soft ROI if you can show them how it's tied to these projects. And so it's important to look at projects and realize that it doesn't have to have both hard and soft ROI. It can have one or the other, and it can have both. But it's important to understand what is that impact? And when you're quantifying it in that spreadsheet, mark that down. Is this hard ROI, soft ROI? What does that look like? And to what degree are we going to see that return on investment? And a CFO, most likely if you're reporting in through the CFO, they're going to want to know about hard ROI. Actually, in most modern workplaces, CFOs are now starting to look more like COOs, so they may also care about the soft ROI. CEOs, in most cases, if you can get yourself to the CEO to present this, then they care about the soft ROI. They want their workforce to be excited to come to work every day. Look, most of the workforce is going to be, more than 50% is going to be millennials in the next couple of years. And when it gets to that point, millennials want the newest technology. They want the technology that's the fastest to use. They want things that give them information on demand. That is what they want. That is what the workforce wants. And so your CEO, your executives, if you present them the right information, they should acknowledge that. And they should be on board with making changes that attract that kind of a workforce, that retain that kind of a workforce, that make that kind of a workforce more productive day to day. And next is about prioritizing and designing the right solutions. And again, this goes back to that quote from the beginning. One of the reactions that I got from my post, from my article, was it's about the right solutions. It's about the right solutions for your organization. So think about the ROI and think about where the biggest bang for your buck is. Not necessarily, it's not just money. It's time. It's political capital. Really think about your spreadsheet. You take this whole spreadsheet and start sorting through it, start filtering it and saying, okay, here's where I can get the biggest bang for my buck and the best return on my investment of my time or my political capital or my budget. And that's really important is making sure you're choosing the right thing first. Think about all the elements. Again, I've been talking a lot about technology, but like we saw even in this poll, knowledge and the knowledge gaps and people's resistance to change and all of that, those are real sources of friction. And so spending time when you're designing these solutions to design how are you going to accompany the technology solution with knowledge? How are you going to roll out this technology? How do you get buy-in from various people in the organization? How do you show people that this change you're going to make is going to make them more successful, get them paid more, make their projects more successful? That's a really important portion here of choosing the right solution and having the full solution versus one piece of it, just the technology or just the knowledge or just the people. It's about thinking about how all of these things come together. And so, first of all, which technologies do you already have today? How are they being used? Can you consolidate them? Should you be leveraging all of them? What plays well together? I'll give you an example of this. If you're already an Atlassian shop, it doesn't really make sense to go and start buying new software to do intranets. You might as well go with Confluence. It's part of the package. It works beautifully with Jira. And it doesn't make sense to go and spend money now and spin up a new technology with a new UI and everything else if you already have that there. There could be an argument made for if you already have Google, or if you already have Office 365, G Suite or Office 365, should you just stick with the cloud storage and collaboration tools built in? Should you just go with Drive if you're on G Suite? Should you just go with OneDrive if you're on Office 365? There's a question about that. And in some cases, the answer is yes. In other cases, it's no. You know what? Actually, Box is the right solution for that, even though I use Office 365, because Box has this and this and this feature that is really important for my architecture firm. Versus a technology company that may say, yep, you know what, I actually am just going to stick with what I get out of the box because it's already integrated and it's already in one UI. And then next is knowledge. Again, what does the team need? We looked at, just to give you an idea, we looked at the searches that happen on our monitor site, which is the blog that we have, that we publish a daily newsletter out of. And we were looking at what searches are happening on the monitor every day. And it's amazing to see the volume, hundreds of thousands of searches about very basic things in G Suite or in Slack or in Dropbox, very, very basic. And you realize that people don't know how to do that. And they may not know how to do that because they have never used G Suite before at any other company, and then they join a company that is all G Suite, and they're not really prepared for that. It could be that they are from an older generation, and they have never used something like a Slack, and understanding how to interact with Slack and what the right the right cadence there is, and what to use Slack for versus not. There's a lot that knowledge that I think is taken for granted, to be very frank. I think is taken for granted. I've seen it at BetterCloud. We are all SaaS. We are very heavy on G Suite. We are very heavy on Slack. When new people join the company, there is an assumption. There is just an assumption made by me, made by the whole organization, that the people joining just know how to use those solutions. We do some training on it. We show them, but there's just an assumption that they know how to use it. Why? Maybe their last company, they used Lotus Notes and Microsoft Office and PCs, and here they're using generally Macs and G Suite and Slack. And so knowledge is very important to think about. And then people, who is involved? Who's involved in rolling this out? Is it just you? Is it the rest of your team? Do you need department heads on board? Who do you have to convince? Again, we talked about this, and knowing your audience is very important here. What is going to be important to the sales manager? Giving the salespeople back 20 minutes every day, that is very important to the sales manager, and they will go to bat for you all the way to the CEO if you can show them that you can do that. Helping the sales organization be faster at making phone calls and having a dialer that connects into Salesforce and is integrated and this and that could save people hours a day. That's where you're going to get huge buy-in. So understanding your audience and understanding how you can get buy-in for these projects, that is very important. So I wanted to take you through how I think about this. If I were in your shoes, and if I was starting from scratch with this and I wasn't the CEO, I would look at the projects on my list and I would break it down by what are the things that are good value to the organization, but I can really get done quickly. So I would start with something like, and this may be wrong, but making it easier to submit tickets to IT. Seems maybe small, but when you're talking about an organization where people rely on IT, having that be a seamless experience should not be understated. And that could be, I'll tell you, in the most recent survey we did of our customers and our community, we found that a large portion of people still use email to do all internal ticketing. And my opinion personally is that if you have full-time IT inside of an organization, email is not the right way to handle ticketing because things fall through the cracks. People don't have an opportunity to go and see the status of a ticket. It's actually easier on both sides. So going and implementing a system to do that is pretty minimal investment, especially if there's only a couple of IT people. It's pretty minimal investment, and the improvement and the experience for your users can be huge. And so that's a win where you don't really need much money. You don't really need much time from people. You don't really need much, and you can give good value. Then I would tackle something else. Look for a specific point solution that's currently being used. That's just a pain for your users. And look at that and go try to replace that one point solution. I'm not saying replace everything in your environment with SaaS, but I'll use expense reports. Look at what's being used for expense reporting. You probably have to submit expense reports. Look at what that is. And if you are currently playing the expense report Tetris with the receipts, then go replace it with Expensify. And that is not a huge most people in an organization, including finance, when they really understand how it works, will look at that and go, whoa, that's probably going to save me in finance hours a month, let alone how much happier my users are going to be and probably how much more accurate their expense reports are going to be, because it's just reading their receipts and it's embedding and it's integrated with their credit card statements. That's an example of another win that's not. It's not a major lift, and you're not having to put your whole political capital on the line. There's many companies in the world that use a product like that. Go get another win like that. And then maybe another one that's a little harder, because you're probably going to have to, within IT, you're probably going to have to make some changes, and there could be some changes from a budget level. But just making a decision like, look, I'm going to let my employees choose whatever device they want. Why does every employee have to use exactly the device? We're a Mac shop, or we're a PC shop, or we're only Linux. Let people choose. Again, you want people to walk in to an office and you want them to bring their entire self, their best self, to that office every day. That's what you want. That's what a company wants. And so if I'm used to using a PC and I've been using it for 20 years, and it's not a big deal for IT to provide me with a PC versus a Mac, and I'm going to be able to work that much faster on a PC, then that's something to look at. The increase in budget is probably, when it comes down to it, really not that much, because all the devices cost about the same. But it's really about getting the buy-in that choice is something you want to give. Then maybe it's something, a decision to say, hey, we're going to go all SaaS. And a lot of times, in other cases, if you haven't been building up credibility and been making these changes from a friction perspective, making that decision, usually something has to drive that decision. There was some event that occurred that made somebody say, we are going all SaaS. So I know that when we had the flooding here in New York a number of years ago with that hurricane, when that occurred, that was something where anyone who had their office in the part of Manhattan that had no power, anyone who was in IT in that part of Manhattan, when they finished and they got back into the office and power was restored, they made the decision that they're getting rid of all servers and they're going all SaaS, because the pain they felt during that was so bad that was the decision point. In other organizations, we've seen that it's a new leadership team and they say, we're coming in, we're modernizing, and we're changing everything: culture, people, everything, and technology. And so but if you've been building up credibility as you go, making a decision like that, if there's proof points along the way, then you can go and ask for a decision like that to be made, and you're going to have a lot more credibility because you've been biting off things and chewing them and doing a good job along the way, and they're things that didn't require mass changes. And then maybe it's a project to say, hey, we need to go out and get some consultants and start tying all of our systems together. And we need to start tying all these APIs together, and I need to go and learn how to do app script to do X, Y, and Z. And so that's going to probably be a pretty major investment of, it's not really making the decision to go all SaaS. It's making the decision to make SaaS all work together and really powerfully. So this gives you just an idea of how I would think about prioritizing the projects, so that they fall in an order where you're building credibility each time, and your risk each time is pretty low. The likelihood of succeeding is pretty high. And then there's something that would be completely off of this, chart, which I'm not sure if everyone has read recently in the last couple of days, the article about the company in Sweden that's implanting microchips inside of employees' arms so they can use it to access the office and buy food at the cafeteria and do this and do that. So this has been an article that's come out in the last couple of days. That's an example where even if you see that as your utopia, I wouldn't present that to anybody probably for a long time. You're going to need a lot of credibility. You need to build up a lot of trust before you try to go and suggest something like that. So that's an example of something that's completely off this chart. I don't really believe that today that brings much value, but that's an example of what would be off this chart. That would be something that it may be part of the utopia, but when you really think about it in a very futurist way, that's part of the utopia. But realistically, in the next 5 years, that's not something you want to be arguing for or fighting for budget for, unless your CEO's a little bit crazy. Otherwise, you probably don't want to do that. So again, getting quick early wins helps the business trust IT and gives you the freedom to really innovate as time goes on. By the time you do the fifth one, the reaction is going to be, you did 4 other ones that were amazing. Of course, go do it. How much budget do you need? So it's about building that up, and that's going to take time in the beginning. But once you have some of those under your belt, everyone's going to look to you because IT is at the center of everything. You cannot talk about a project today, a transformation project, a friction reducing project, anything without technology, and therefore without IT. You cannot do that. IT is at the center of literally everything, and it's only becoming more important by the day as IoT becomes bigger, as wearables, as the environments become more heterogeneous. IT is at the center of everything. And so if you can be successful, then you can build that trust. You can get executive buy-in. You can have true freedom to innovate in this area. So now I'm just going to open it up real quickly before I go into what we did here at BetterCloud. I have some very specific examples. I'm going to open this up for the next question, which is, after today's discussion, what do you believe you need most to reduce friction in your organization? And so I'm going to open this up here. If everyone can just jump into the screen. You've got a couple of answers here. So more buy-in from leadership, executives, more time. Maybe it's just purely time that you need. More budget, different technology that works better for your organization, and then nothing. You're ready to kind of get going right now. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Again, we'll share the results. The answer is 39% more time and 28% more buy-in. So that's really helpful. Again, I'm just going to let me take you through some of these examples, because I think when you see some of the things that we did here at BetterCloud, let me first take you through the key takeaways. So the 3 main takeaways: friction is hugely impactful, and reducing it is a high ROI activity that for IT and really for your organization as a whole. Friction is created by many different forces, not just technology. I put this in here as a key takeaway even to remind myself, because this is something that I'm so biased towards it, but it's really not just technology. We even saw it with the answers that you gave in the first poll. To solve friction, visualize the outcome, determine what it would take to get there, quantify the impact, and then prioritize and design solutions. So now I'm going to take you through some of the ones that we've done at BetterCloud. And given that everyone said they need more time, I think this will help, because I think you'll see some of the examples of what you can do. And so let me start with this. Now, just so everyone knows, I'm just going to a couple things. One, a question just came in. We are going to be recording this. We are recording this, and we will be sharing this out afterwards. And so everyone will have this. I don't know exactly when, but you will have a recording of this. And number 2 is that as I'm going through this, Tim Burke, who's our director of IT, is in Better IT right now. So again, if you go to the Better IT community that we mentioned before, betterit.cloud, if you go there and join the webinar channel, Tim is there. So if you have questions about some of these projects, Tim is there and can answer some of these specific questions. So let me start with this. So here's things we've done at almost no additional cost. And even time, it's taken time from Tim, but I think that even if you have a little bit of time, you can do some of these things. So number 1 was just the stated fact that we have a cloud-first strategy. Every time we look at any solution for anything, the number 1 thing is it is going to be cloud-first. It is going to be a SaaS application. Again, with a name like BetterCloud, if that wasn't the case, we'd have a problem, but that's the case. We created this really interesting wins channel and help channel in Slack. This was really interesting. So wins channel is something where we have a channel that has a feed that is coming from Salesforce and Zendesk and Jira and everywhere. And anytime there is a win to be celebrated in the organization, small wins, a really positive comment from a customer after support experience, a release that just went out with a new feature, a promotion within the company. Any of these things is automatically getting fed into this wins channel. It's a channel that every single person at BetterCloud is a member of and is subscribed to. And so everyone can be kept in the loop on what's happening on a day-to-day basis. We probably get 8 or 9 things being posted to the wins channel every day. And it was a way to bring the whole organization together and reduce friction of having to send emails every week by each department head to say, here are the key wins that we got this week, or here are the key. So it's a small thing. Not so much time, no extra budget. We already have Slack. But what that has done to make sure that every person in our organization is on the same page and knows exactly what's happening, real time, on demand, when it's happening, not 2 weeks later, is so powerful. And there's a help channel so that everyone can go, and if there's issues, if there's questions, you can see here on the left, it's easy channel. People are living in Slack. Why make them leave Slack to ask some of these questions? And so this is simple. This is a small thing, but it does reduce friction. We've come up with we came up with the decision, let people select whatever equipment they want. Again, budget is the same. It's in our budget anyway. We're paying for devices anyway for people. It doesn't matter. Whatever people are really comfortable with, that's what we're going to give them. We even have a choice. You can have 1 monitor, 2 monitors. Again, budget is generally the same thing. It's just how do people like to work? In every conference room, we have these conference room info sheets that talk about how do you reach the phone there? How do you log into how do you use the Chromebox? What are the different HDMI inputs? What's the Wi-Fi if there's a guest in the room? Small thing. And again, maybe many people on this webinar today do this, but this is a small addition that all of a sudden it reduced the number of questions coming into IT by so much because people just had the information at their fingertip when they sit down and they don't really need to ask, and hey, how do I do this? And is it HDMI 1 or HDMI 2? And is it this? And what's the phone number for this conference room? We preloaded the laptops. We have an offsite that's coming up in a couple weeks, and we've preloaded the laptops with all the Wi-Fi networks for that offsite. A small thing, but when people open up their laptops at the offsite, we're not having to give them, hey, log in with this and then go to this. They open up and they're on, and they're working. No money. There's nothing. I mean, these are things we already have in place. Casper, we already have in place the device management stuff. No extra money, but it reduces friction. This small, but when you add these things up, it makes a big difference. We've taken time from our all hands meetings that we do every month, and there's dedicated time for IT now. So we get up and talk about the updates from IT, and those updates could be, hey, all our Chromebox for meetings, you're going to experience, there's going to be a new experience that you're going to see. This is how to work with it. This is how to use the new meeting code. This is how to use, we could not do that. It's an extra 5-10 minutes of a meeting. But with that extra 5-10 minutes, how much time is that saving people in the frustration when they go to sit in all of our conference rooms and they all have Chromeboxes and they don't know how to get into a meeting, or they need to fiddle with the thing and figure it out? Maybe it's a new update that for IT, a new policy that they want to share, a new way to open up tickets, all of that is now being able to be communicated to the entire company at one time in a succinct way. We federated identity from Google. We're using Google now to do single sign-on into no extra cost. We already have Google. We already have G Suite. Everyone lives in it anyway. And so now as we're buying new SaaS applications, we're not having to distribute passwords. People aren't having to set up accounts. They're just logging in with Google. Again, you start adding these things up though, and you start looking at a very, very different environment very quickly. And how much time is each of these things taking? Not probably time that people have. And then there's things that we've spent money on. And again, like I said, there's, it ranges, but here's some of the things we've spent money on. We've put in literally top of the line network in our offices. Our equipment is the newest, brand new from Meraki. It's when Meraki comes out with new hardware, we're replacing our hardware. We invest to make sure that when someone walks in the door, they can open up their laptop, and within seconds, I mean, I use a Chromebook, a Pixel. It takes me 9 seconds to get on my email. 9 seconds. I walk in the door, and in 9 seconds, I can be writing emails. I mean, it makes a difference. It makes a difference if you can do that, and you know that it's going to be available, and I can move around the office, and I'm not losing connectivity. And so we've invested in top of the line equipment. We have TVs everywhere. Again, when you go to think about the Wins channel, we have TVs everywhere in the company that has interesting contextual information for the department that's sitting around that. That may seem like a small it's a big investment, but and maybe you wonder, how is that going to pay off? But if you go and sit with each individual department and team members and department heads and say, what information do you want everyone in your team to be looking at all day long? What's the most important KPI for your team? How can I display that's going to get people motivated or keep people on the same page? For an engineering perspective, we have all of our Jira boards up on TVs with the teams where they sit in their pods with their burn down charts that they can see all day, every day, without having to tab through and look for it. And it's right there. So we spent money. It's a good amount of money buying the TVs, mounting them everywhere. We have Chromeboxes in every single meeting room, and now in almost every single private office. Again, investment. But now everyone is using the same thing, and you're not walking into one conference room and having a different experience than in another conference room. You're not having to use cords to present. You can do everything over Chromebox for meetings, and there's consistency. When you travel from one of our offices to another office, you know that if you walk into any room and you book any room, that you're going to have a Chromebox that's going to be tied to that resource. And so again, took time, took money to set up. But the experience now and the consistency to that experience is huge. And so talking about the all hands meeting, we now have a new setup for that. So because people were going and sitting in different rooms and in different things, now we're doing it all together in a single room and we invested to set that up. We have monitors, people can have space to work, have space to spread out because again, if you look at certain parts of our organization, support, they need to have the application up, they need to have the knowledge base up, chat up, email up. And so giving people the space to work and not having to tab through things and having everything there, you can save people. If you think about how much people are being paid, it makes a big difference when you have these kinds of things set up. High performance computers. So again, regularly replacing those. We're not replacing them every 6 months, but we used to replace them every 3 years, and now it's at least every 18 months. And it makes a big difference if everyone can. The slowness. Think about the frustration that causes, especially if you're using all SaaS applications and you need good connectivity. You need power. This is the. So it's an investment, but the incremental investment is relatively small compared to that soft ROI. And so here's some of the stuff we haven't done yet. So again, to this point of you need more time. We need more time. We can't do everything that we want to be doing. And so there's some things that are on our list. One of them is for our developers to be able to get to our internal networks and to get to cloud platform and compute engine and app engine. And we're putting in Pulse Secure. And so that's going to remove all the VPN work that's required from our developers to get into the environments that they need to get into. So that's a pretty major investment in both offices to make sure that people can quickly access without all the logging in and this and that, using Google SSO, get in and go straight into compute or app engine or wherever they need to get to. Cardless, no more key cards. We're looking at replacing the key cards with devices and Bluetooth on devices, and this is not necessarily a mandatory thing, but I would like that. I would like if I don't have to carry a key card and I can just use my phone that I have with me all the time. Why not? And so it's things like that. Again, an investment. We have to change all the card readers. We have to there's a whole thing we have to do, but we're looking at that. So with that, well, we only have about 6 minutes left. So again, if you have questions, you can go ahead and ask them in Better IT. And if you haven't joined there yet, then you can do that now. Otherwise, I'm going to just take a quick look at some of the questions and see if there's any that I can answer while we're still here. So one question is how can we calculate, how would we, or how can we calculate ROI? Let's say change in percentage in efficiency on changes that we make. So that's a really good question of, again, it depends which ROI you're really looking at. But I think it's a matter of, with soft ROI, it's very, very hard, except for if you really watch and shadow. This is something that Tim has done, actually. Shadow a particular department. Shadow somebody in that department. Watch them for a day, for half the day, and watch what they do. I bet you'll see, just by sitting and watching them, how many things you can replace, remove, improve in their day-to-day process. And you can calculate that. You can look at that and say, it takes them this long to do this, and then open this, and then upload the file into this, and then do this. And we just removed all of that. And that just saved, just literally based on timing them and watching how long it takes, it saves them 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, whatever the time may be. And the soft ROI, I think, is looking and saying to people and different departments, hey, what is it that you want to work on that you haven't had a chance to get to? What are you seeing that would really help you be more effective in your jobs? And it's hard to put an exact number to it, but if you can directionally say, this is a project that has been on the back burner because they don't have the time to do it, or they don't have the technology to do it, or they don't have the data to do it, or they don't have, and we can provide that to them if we give them this and this and this tool, and we take it this and this time to do that, that's the stuff that people will react really positively to. So another question is, I like these ideas, but I have to admit they seem easier to implement at a tech-focused company. It's a constant battle to remind all individuals that IT isn't just service. And so, I think with that one, that's a really interesting question. And I think it's definitely easier at a tech forward company. But like I said, if you can get an audience with a CEO and you can show them, look at what our population is. Even not tech forward companies have mostly millennials. It just is the fact that they are going to make up by population 50% of the workforce by 2020. PwC, I think, or Accenture put out that stat recently. That if you just show that and say, let me show you a survey I did of this group of people and their opinion of the technologies we use versus what they want to use, and their happiness at work, if you show that to somebody, to an executive who's responsible for the productivity and the success of a company, even at a non-tech forward company, it is hard for somebody to fight that, to say, yes, you're right. I understand that no one likes working here with the technologies that we give them. It takes them 4 times as long to do their work. And if we spent an extra X amount, maybe 10% more than our current budget, we could eliminate 40% of those problems. How does no good business person looks at that equation? If presented to them correctly with the right data to back it up, it's impossible. You cannot look at that and argue that. And so I think the key is, how do you make the argument? How do you get the data, to the question that was asked before? How do you get the right ROI? How do you get the data to back up your argument? How do you get people and users in the organization to back up your argument? How do you do that where you can really present a very compelling case? And honestly, we wanted to try to put together here even a sample of how you would do that. And honestly, we just didn't have enough time to do that. And so that's something that we may want to do as a follow-on to this, is to put together almost a framework for how you can present to an executive to get their buy-in. So I think that's something really important. And I will say this, and this is not an exaggeration. Anyone who works here at BetterCloud knows this is true. If anyone on this webinar or anyone who listens to this wants me to have a conversation, wants me to share this presentation with your executives, I will do that gladly. I am if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this subject, and I truly believe it's something that's not that hard to fix, but is not being fixed enough and not being focused on enough. So I'm happy to have that conversation and have a CEO to CEO conversation to say, let me just show you the things we've done and how easy some of them are and how big of an impact that can have. And as soon as they see that, again, it's how it's presented. So how does a business rely on G Suite, Zoho, Office Online, etc., when business partners are expecting output from desktop applications, the old Microsoft standard? So I think, well, there's I think this is one of those knowledge things where if there's a way to show your workers and your team how to take what's being produced in the native G Suite, and how to produce that as a Word document, and what the process is so that when they send it, they go and they send it as a Word doc, right, out of Drive when you're creating a doc, and you could send that as a Word doc or as a CSV. I think it's just a matter of training. I mean, we have a lot of customers that are not on G Suite, that we've interacted with. Let me not say customers yet, but people we work with that are not on G Suite. And so it's really a matter of our team having the knowledge to know, hey, when you're interacting with someone like this, here's how you need to leverage the tools that are in Drive to make that experience for the person on the other end feel like they're interacting with a Microsoft shop. And when it comes back, here's what to do with that to make it into something that you can then manipulate and use internally. So, okay, we're out of time. I see some people. Obviously, we only blocked an hour. So we'll try to take a lot of these questions and answer them the best we can, and also send out the presentation and the recording and the results from the survey. So we're going to do all of that. I'll get with the team here after this and do that. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, if you did, it would be great, to get some emoji voting. We always love emoji voting in Better IT. So if you guys liked it, tell me how you liked it with an emoji. And we love this. If you guys have other ideas, you can always reach me at dave@bettercloud.com. If you ever have ideas, you ever want me to jump on the phone with one of your executives, you ever want to talk about any of this, I'm really, truly very passionate about it, and I'm happy to do that anytime. And we'll try to get to all these questions as quickly as we can. So thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. I really honestly hope that you enjoyed this and it was useful, and we'll continue to provide more like this going forward. And so thank you very much.